Well, welcome everybody. Good to see so many people here today. Welcome to the Whitman Philadelphia Expo, our first expo here in this famous city. My name is Dennis Tucker. I'm the publisher at Whitman Publishing. And it's an honor to introduce Larry Schuffman, who's going to be talking about something that I actually have an interest in. That's not coins or medals or tokens, but World War I history and America's involvement in capitalizing on patriotism to support the war effort through the sale of Liberty loan bonds. So, Larry,
Great,
welcome.
Dennis, thanks very much.
Just don't leave.
Here we go. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for coming this morning. I'm Larry Schuffman, and I'm here to talk with you about passion. All right. Occasionally, what will happen at shows is I'll get an idea from speaking with someone who's very passionate about what they enjoy, their families, what they do for a living, or what they collect. And most of us in the room here collect something. Why do we do it? We do it because we're passionate about what we do. One of the additional benefits of being passionate about something is that we all are given a gift. And the gift happened to me about a month ago. And I received a phone call from a very nice gentleman. And he said that his dad, actually he asked me, he said, have you been able to do some research about what Philadelphians did as far as promoting the Liberty Loan Bond during World War I? I said, I had just gotten back from doing some research, but I always welcome something else because I want to provide a local flavor to everyone so they could see how hard people from Philadelphia worked to get this done. And he mentioned that his dad was instrumental in the promotion, sale, and ultimate success of the World War I Liberty Loan campaign, not only within the city of Philadelphia back during the teens, but also in South Jersey and in Delaware as well. In fact, his grassroots efforts that he worked so hard to get going and promoting caught on not only in this third Federal Reserve District, but the other 11 districts are as well. And because of the monies that were raised through this gentleman's efforts, going to everyday people, folks who worked in the coal mines, folks who worked in the farms, folks who worked downtown on Market Street, okay? We were able to, as a nation, ultimately to defeat the Imperial German Army and help the Allies win the war in World War I. Now, the gentleman who called me up, he's here today. His name is Michael Sienkiewicz. Michael, if you please stand up and let's all give him a hand.
That hand's for my father, not me.
All right. But you know what? If it wasn't for your dad, you wouldn't be here today. So thank you very much. And because of the information that Michael gave me, I've been really privileged to be able to provide extra information to everyone today about what happened. Now, before we start, there's a few ground rules. Ground rule number one, please, ask any question. Now, I can always tell you if I'm going to answer it or not, but any question, please, you can ask. There's no dumb questions. And now, because of what I do in my other life, I need to share with you a brief disclaimer that we're going to see very shortly. So I'm going to do this real quick. Here's a disclaimer. Okay, done. Now, okay. Oh, I got to do it? Okay. Here's the disclaimer. And I have to show this because of what I do, again, for a living so that I can afford to enjoy my passion in Liberty Loan Bonds. So here we go. Now, one of the things that I learned, and I'm also an adjunct professor and I really enjoy teaching, is I want to stick to an outline. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about a brief history of the Liberty Loan Bonds and the players who were involved in the sale of these bonds, the bonds themselves. Why do I think, first of all, why do I enjoy collecting them? And again, I have some friends in the audience who are doing that as well. A chart of the issues, and then we're going to have a little question and answer session. So let's begin. The man behind, on a federal level, the man behind the bonds and their announcement, William Gibbs McAdoo, was the nation's first Fed chairman. Now he's on the left, okay? And on the right, you see what's called an announcement, or in essence like a red herring, although back then they didn't have the red line down the side, talking about the Liberty Loan bonds that were sold. And these are some pieces within the collection that my family has, but I wanted to share these with you today. Now, what I find is really interesting about this is if you look at the interest rate here, 3.5%. Now, this is 92 years ago, today. or from today, 92 years back. The point I want to bring out is, again, 3.5% on a bond is pretty much about what they're paying on 15, 20-year bonds today in the market on federal bonds. The difference back then is that interest rate was tax-free. All right? And back then the interest rates were much higher. I'm sorry, the tax rates were much higher, so it allowed people to not only support the government, but put a little more money in their pocket. The caveat about this was the fact that William Gibbs McAdoo wanted to bring out to the American public the idea of supporting the war effort and being a patriot. Prior to this period of time, when bonds were sold, they had very arcane names, like 725s or 1530s. Who knows from 1530s? It doesn't make any sense. So he decided, let me come up with a name. He said, we have all these people, okay, like Michael's dad, who we're going to talk about in a moment, who came here from Europe back before the turn of the century or shortly thereafter, all right? And they wanted to have some people get behind, be passionate, be a patriot, have the feeling. So they said, let's come up with the name Liberty Loan Bonds. Because what was the first thing, little questions from the audience, what was the first thing that people saw when they came on the ships to America in many cases? Statue of Liberty, absolutely. And when seeing something like this, and we'll go back to this again in a second, this gentleman, again, Kazimir Sienkiewicz, all right, became so, I'm trying to think of the right word, so proud, so passionate about his new country, all right? He worked many, many years to learn the English language, but he spoke 6 or 7 others. And he decided, let me enlist. So he enlisted into the US Army, and all of a sudden people start to find out, well, this man speaks all these languages. Well, among different things that you need to fight a war effort, what do you need? Money. You need men, machines, and I'm being sexist, I'm saying men in the overall sense, because the women were wonderful in the war as well, but you need money. And what happened that was very, very interesting is Mr. Sienkiewicz went out and raised a tremendous amount of money, $25 million back then, going out and talking to everyday folks like you and me, okay, merchants, people working the coal mines, wherever, where the average income back then was between $1,000 and $2,000 a year. So for someone to buy a $50 bond or a $100 bond, that was a tremendous amount of money. In terms of dollars today, that's $500 million. And that's real money. Because back then, what were those bonds backed by? Gold. All right. Now, what the Treasury Secretary decided was, believe it or not, borrowing for liberty was a way to fund the war effort. Because in doing that, what would they do? People would go to the banks and borrow some money. So in terms, they took money from the bank, they borrowed some money, the banks got to have money circulating, all right? And this was a way to keep inflation down. Now, I'm going to show you some items that, again, I've been very privileged to see in the Smithsonian Institution. This is a proof of a certificate, okay? This is the Treasury Savings Certificate. People literally, what they would do, again, was called the borrow and buy strategy. They would borrow money, get the money, fill up the books, get their certificates. They either got certificates or they got bonds, all right? War savings certificates and thrift stamps were marked heavily to the public. And in fact, one thing I found out from the information that Michael gave to me was the Philadelphia district, District number 3, had the lowest cost of all the 12 districts, okay, to get these distributed. It was like 0.3% of every dollar raised. Talk about passion. People worked very, very hard to get this done. Now, who are the folks who did this? They were Wall Street bankers. People took years off in many cases, and although I'll get back and I'll share a story with you about some of the bankers in Wall Street. Life insurance agents, the Boy and Girl Scouts were tremendously instrumental. going door to door and raising money for the war effort, for people to buy either the stamps or the bonds. Entertainers, which you'll see in everyday folks like you and me. Now, one of the stories that were shared with me, and again, talk about passion. When people learn that you're passionate about something, you meet people who share a same passion in whatever it is. So I've been privileged to meet folks like John Herzog, who's the chairman emeritus of SPINC. John has a Wall Street background. His dad was working on Wall Street, many, many years ago, and his dad told me that most of the Wall Street bankers were very honest. There were some who were a little unscrupulous, and what they would do is, I'm going to skip ahead for a second, and then we'll come back to this, is what they would do, if you take a look, what are these things around the bond, folks? Coupons, okay? But think about this. Right after the turn of the century, how many average Americans, maybe they knew what a bond was because the railroads were always issuing them, but most common folks had no reason to buy them. Maybe they put a little money in the bank or they put it in a jar and they put it up on top of the shelf. They didn't know what these were. So what some unscrupulous people did was they literally would cut the coupons off the bond and sell the person the bond. Okay, so John shared that story with me. It's just kind of interesting. So, but let's go back a little bit. All right, now. All right, sorry. These are some of the badges, again, that folks wore. This is one that the Boy Scouts had, and they wore this with pride. The Liberty Loan Army went door to door, and literally it was about, I think, 3 or 4 million people went door to door selling these, and again, they'd have some identification so people would know that they were on the level. All right? Now, the Boy and Girl Scouts of Philadelphia helped out also tremendously, and these were photos courtesy of the Historical Society of Philadelphia. You could see what, again, talking about the Girl Scouts, they went out in this situation. They were told, and I thought this was interesting, we're not allowing our Girl Scouts to sell in this loan, but there's no reason why they shouldn't run errands. Now, I got to tell you, they were as competent, if not more, the Boy Scouts were, but they wanted the young ladies to stay home and run errands while the Boy Scouts were out peddling the paper. I don't know. I don't understand, just something that they did. All right? Now, to reward everyday Americans who sold the bonds in many cases, and they displayed these very proudly, they would receive certificates from the Federal Loan District where they were. This was from New York, which I think is the second Federal Reserve District. And some of the folks at the time who were dignitaries, J.P. Morgan, which I'm sure a lot of folks will recognize, Jacob Schiff, Vanderlips, Benjamin Strong, and for those of you who collect large-sized currency, you'll see his signature on some different pieces of currency. But people, please.
Is that actually signed on the bottom right? Or were those?
This one was machine printed. I have a couple that were original, so thank you, Dennis, for the question. Absolutely. Now, so again, folks, please ask questions. It wasn't just the president who got into the act here in Philadelphia, all right? As you can see, there are some wonderful ladies who are helping out right in front of the Rusk Library in Philadelphia. And then here's Mrs. Woodrow Wilson and other prominent Philadelphians involved in a Liberty Loan rally. Everything would stop. They'd have marches, people would be out, they'd display as the war went on, captured German cannon. In fact, many of you may have seen medallions that are made from the captured German cannon, and you'll see these at shows that they would melt down and make into coins that people would carry as a lucky piece. Now, here's the thing. Now think about this. In 1917, 1918, all the way up to 1927, how were movies different then, maybe other than the fact they're black and white, than they are today, folks? What was the big difference with movies? Silent, exactly. So think about this for a second. Here's the little tramp, Charlie Chaplin. Yeah, oh my God, he's right. This is Wall Street. He's standing on the federal building right across from literally the stock exchange.
With the statue.
Yes, yes. Can you imagine the draw for the little tramp coming out and talking to everybody about this? Just to hear Charlie Chaplin must have been an amazing thing. But these folks went out there, no pay at all. There were over 250,000 people that day jammed into that little area in New York City. So the political fervor and passion was just amazing. Now, speaking about passion, okay, I don't know if you can see who this young lady is on the side. This is Mary Pickford, all right? She would be maybe like the Gwyneth Paltrow of today. I mean, beautiful, elegant starlet. Well, she went around the country on trains, again, selling millions and millions of Liberty Loan bonds to everyday folks like you and me. People figured that, you know what, going back to this, you were not 100% American. You were not 100% American, okay, as Kaz was back then, if you didn't buy the Liberty Loan bond or at least the stamps. And in fact, 1 in 2 Americans did. And those folks that didn't, in many cases, and I know this is really small, so you're not going to be able to see this, but they went to one house, they knocked on the door, and it said in several cases, the Liberty Bond canvassers had clashes with individuals who expressed sympathy for Germany. There was one gentleman who had a Hindenburg statue. He said, "Get out!" Well, in some cases, these folks were taken out, and it was expressed to them very, very sternly that they should be, if they're not going to support and buy the bonds, they should keep their political thoughts to themselves. Skip ahead a little bit. Now, the massive bond drives and sales of the thrift stamps were a way, again, to curb civilian consumption during the war effort, because what happens when there's a war, we're shipping things overseas to our troops. We have to feed them, okay? So this is a way of taking, again, money out of circulation to keep inflation down, which can happen during wartime. And how do they do it? Help them. And these are some posters I have at home. Keep your war savings pledge. Again, here are the war savings stamps. Women of America, save your country and buy war stamps. These are plastered everywhere. And here's the other thing. America was not the only country that did it. Okay, there's a book that's out that has, and this happened in all of the Allied countries. This happened in all the countries affiliated with the Imperial German Empire as well. Beautiful posters. So for those of you in the audience who may want to collect posters, these are just tremendous, and I feel they're very affordable. Now, I call this patriotism or propaganda. Now, this poster over here, I am very blessed. I have a wonderful bride of almost 19 years. Her name is Marcia, and a daughter, her name is Michaela. And other than the two of them, this is the only other woman that's allowed in the house to take permanent residence. And this young lady is up in our living room, all right? Beautiful poster, America's All. And I don't know if you can see the names, but all the names are represented here: Dubois, Smith, O'Brien, Ceja, Mackey. I can't see that clear, but you've got Greek names, Russian names, Polish names, Spanish names, Indian American names, everything except what kind of name? German names. Okay? Now again, what did folks think about the Germans back then? Look at this. This is gruesome. This looks like Frankenstein with a bayonet. Okay? Beat back the Hun with Liberty Loan bonds. Come on, you've got a doughboy here who's already wounded, okay? Did his business, buy more Liberty bonds. Back him up by Liberty bonds. It was like you just heard a rap song in your head. Buy the bonds, buy the bonds, buy the bonds. That was the thing, and that's what went on in America. Now, the bonds themselves, the data on the bonds. The first Liberty Loan, they issued $2 billion, all right? There were 4 million subscribers. All right, number of bonds issued. Second Liberty Loan, and there were 5 issues. 9.4 million, 18.3, 23 million, okay, 12 million bonds. They sold back then $21.5 billion. That's a huge amount of money. That's real money. That's gold money. All right. Probably would be, I don't know, 20 times that, $500 billion today. Unredeemed as of 1990, only $4.5 million of the bonds are unredeemed. There's not that many of them out there. They are very scarce. Now think about this. These bonds were cash. Folks, what happened between 1919, when the war was finally over, 1918, 1919, and the troops came home, and 1945? What big economic event occurred? The Great Depression. So can you imagine having one of these at home? Yes, you've held it for a long time. You still get to clip the coupons, assuming you've got all your coupons, and had maybe $50 or $100 at home. That might have fed your family for a month. The fact that there are any of these around today is a miracle to me. So how many have been lost to history? How many have you seen? Now, homegrown pride. I'm going to go up the street a little bit to Baltimore. All right. T.S. Abel, the publishers for the Baltimore Sun, the fervor was so strong. People wanted to buy these bonds that just before they first came out, people were issued certificates for the bonds, and then they would turn these in. So these are, again, certificates, beautiful ones. And in fact, there's a gentleman, his name is Russ Sears. Russ is also very passionate about collecting items. And Russ has one of these certificates that is from a prison in Baltimore, that all the prisoners got behind this, and they saved their nickels and dimes that they received from working on whatever they worked on back then, turned it over to the warden, and they bought, I think, $3,000 worth of Liberty Loan bonds. So not only it was the general public, it was the incarcerated public as well that got behind this. Now you can see why I like these, and other people as well. It is beautiful, big money. And there's some on display downstairs. Literally looks like big money. And again, going back to this, what was the first thing that folks saw as they headed into Ellis Island? Lady Liberty. So the folks involved in marketing said, hey, you know what? Let's put this on the bond. Why they don't do this today, I don't understand, but that's for another lecture, okay? You're supposed to laugh, sorry, all right? Any event, all right? But the vignettes are just tremendous, very patriotic. Now, here's something I want to show you. There was some inflation that happened during the war. The government was very smart, though, and what they said was, if you look, the first interest rate again was 3.5%. Inflation picked up a little bit. Now, if you look, I don't know if you can see, and I'll show you what this is in a second, but first fours started at 3.5%, then the rate went to 4%. But this, I don't know if you can see this, maybe you can see a little better here on a proof from the Smithsonian. I was very honored to get that. In fact, that was signed off by Treasury Secretary Glass. But this says converted. People were able to convert the bonds from a lower interest rate to a higher interest rate. They would literally, the bank office would just cut the coupons off and destroy them. So if someone, let's say, bought one in 1917 at 3.5%, they could convert it to a 4%. They'd have, then when they got them, those coupons that they redeemed would already be taken off. Why do you think, folks, what was the reason that the government wanted to do this? Keep the interest going, but also, too, keep the money. Okay? They didn't redeem them. They could have, but they didn't. Bear in mind, these bonds traded just like regular bonds do today. I have some information that shows, again, during the war, if things were not going well for the Allies, the bonds that someone may have paid $50 or $100 for might have only been worth at the time, 95%. All right? And again, and there were times when they were actually even worth more because interest rates had actually gone down again a little bit toward the end of the war.
Larry, would people
Sir.
only convert the bonds in at the time of maturity, or could they do it at any time in order to convert to the higher rate?
Thank you. Great question, David. Thank you. It was my understanding that people could convert these bonds at any time up to call, as long as there were bonds available that the government had at that time to do that. That's why these, I hope I was clear for everybody, these bonds from the first issue, all right, at the 3.5%, and those again at the 4s are extremely scarce because most folks, as rates went up, what did they do with them? They converted them. Okay? So they were destroyed. This is a proof, so you can kind of see just the same way money. It's just a model. It's a mock-up. All right? Now, again, it went from 3.5 to 4. Again, here's 4.25. First Liberty loan converted. Again, can you see why I enjoy these? Look at this. 3 doughboys charging up the hill to fight the Kaiser's men. Bayonets drawn. Come on, this is don't mess with the U.S. One of the things that I thought was that as each Liberty bond issue opened and closed, that was it. First open, done. Second open, done. I come to find out that they actually had, in some cases, overlapping periods where they issued the first, they stopped that, but then the second and third might have been sold at the same time by the government. Just like today, they'll have, 5-year bonds, 5-year notes, 10-year bonds, 20-year bonds, etc. One of the things I want to go back and show you, okay, 4.25% gold bond, 1932 to 47. Now, this is a converted bond of the bond that came out in 1917. So 32 minus 17 is 15, if math serves me right, with only 1 cup of coffee. Okay, 1947 would be 30 years. So the government had the option of calling that bond at par, meaning the full value, anytime between 1932 and 1947. Now, they had both long bonds, not by size, but periods of time. Again, the coupons on here last more than 2 years. And they also had what was called short bonds. Not because they were small, but the coupon period was a period of 2 years. May 15, 1920. I'm sorry, pardon me 1 second here. Sorry, started November 15, 1918 to May 15, 1920. The reason why they came out with the short bonds is that there were folks in the Treasury who said, you know what? Many people can't afford to lock their money up for 15 or 30 years, so we're going to give them the option to buy these. So somewhere in the indenture in the bottom, it says that people have the right to exchange the bonds when this comes due or just cash them out. Most folks didn't know. Again, beautiful vignettes. This is similar to the vignette on the back of the $10 legal tender note that they call the jackass note. Okay, the reason why is when you turn the eagle upside down, it looks like a donkey. Little numismatic or currency trivia for you. Anyhow, we'll skip on. This bond was exchangeable, again, the short into the long. Second Liberty loan bond of 1918, 4.25% long bond. Again, look at the colors in the vignettes. Just spectacular. Now, think about this. Today we have savings bonds and they're all registered. They also had registered bonds back then as well. Because if you lost a bond with coupons, you're out the money. If you lost a bond that was registered, well, you can still get it replaced by the Fed. And this was here's an example of one of the registered bonds. And they have all, again, the indenture on the front, information on the back that you can transfer the bond to someone else. These are proofs. Again, to get invited down to the Smithsonian was an absolute pleasure for me. And I am very indebted to them for this. And you can see the mock-ups of the bonds and what they look like. These bonds, when they came out, were in sheets of 4. Now, I want you to remember this little void sticker here, because this also, sometimes when you're passionate about things, you get to dig and find information. I never could understand why, you'll see in a second, these bonds on a full sheet started with coupon number 5, but it was cut out. Didn't understand that. I said, how can they issue a bond with kind of a little cut with a rectagonal piece? When they issued the bonds, the bank literally had something called a coupon cutter, and a lot of people had them as well, little brass things, and they would just cut it out because people didn't want the void sticker on. So these bonds are complete starting from number 5. Little Liberty Bond trivia for you. Again, beautiful vignettes, great colors. Here's the 4th Liberty Loan short bond, serial number 1, courtesy of John Herzog. Talk about a wonderful collectible. First in the series. Yep, absolutely. Again, that was a short. Here's the long. They were exchangeable into these. Gold bond in 1933 to 1938. So again, this came out in 1919, 15 years, 1933 to 38. Here is something that I was very happy to have come to me. Just like you'll have replacement currency, they have replacement bonds. And what's neat about it is all the coupons have little stars next to them. All right. So this one we named after our daughter Michaela, but her middle name is Jenny. Says, I like Jenna sometimes better. So we did that, and because she's a star in our life, and that's what we did. So the bond has a pedigree. All right. They're very scarce, and there may not be more than a few of these left in circulation today. And you can see, if you look at the two, this is from the same series, you know, Charlie series C. No star here, star here. The war's over. Work's just begun. Again, John Herzog was, you know, very kind to share this with us. $1,000 bearer bond, victory bond. In today's money, 20 times, 30 times, I mean, and think about this. Never mind that. What about the interest lost on these coupons? Right. Now, let's get back to Philadelphia. Homegrown Philadelphia tune. I don't know what it sounded like. I couldn't, you know, I can't carry a tune, so I'm not going to try to sing it. But you can see, you'll buy, I'll buy, that's a victory loan. Bobby Heath and Sam Gold. Again, courtesy of the Historical Society of Pennsylvania. Now, this is a recent acquisition. I was just privileged to acquire from Donald Kolkman. So far, from what I understand, I'd only seen proofs of these stamps. I'd never seen an original one, and I literally got this yesterday. This is the booklet people would fill out. Here are the stamps. I had a check before from the same place in New York, Victory Liberty Loan Association. Just kind of neat, fun ephemera to have. So, thanks, Don. Does the back of the $1,000 Victory Loan Bond, right here, look familiar to those of you who collect currency? Look at that, don't mess with the US. Beautiful, patriotic, inspiring. Now, why collect them? The Liberty loan bonds and the Victory Liberty loan bonds are part of our proud historical past. The engravings and vignettes are just spectacular. Now, most collectors and currency and coin dealers have not sought out these bonds due to their scarcity. How do you make a market if they're not out there? They come up very, very infrequently. Now, being a contrarian, and again, I have to stress this because of what I do in my other life, I'm not telling you these are investments, so please, okay? I just have to say this for compliance purposes. However, these bonds, I had that fun. These bonds still trade at a reasonable 15 to 50 times their face value, depending upon the grade. Now, for how many people in here, show of hand, collect currency of some kind? Okay. $1 Black Eagle of the 1899 series. These notes were issued by the billions from 1899 to 1923. Many more of these out there. Even one in fine condition is going to sell for about 100 times, pardon me, very fine, 100 times face and 1,000 times in gem uncirculated. And there's so many more of them out there. Why? Again, supply and demand. There's supply out there. So I think these, when you can find them, grab them. Of course, now after the video comes out, I'm never going to be able to get any more. So that's the thing. What are you going to do? All right. The bonds are beautiful. And the bearer bonds are still redeemable for their full face value. That's the thing. Okay? There is an intrinsic value built in. Now here's the thing. Out of the original $21 billion issued, only about $4 million in face still remains unredeemed. One thing I want to stress. In economic terms, World War I cost $32 billion back then. So what Kaz did, Kazimierz Sienkiewicz did, was get people to be proud, to be passionate about doing this, because they were able to raise at 21 billion over 32, if math serves me right, about 2/3 of the money required from the war effort was raised by everyday folks, not through taxation. And that's what Treasury Secretary McAdoo wanted to make sure, did not want to tax the people. There's a few thousand of these bonds unredeemed. That's it. Over the last 90 years, we talked about this. Through World Wars, Great Depression, how many have you seen? And the bonds, the prices have been, again, I still think very reasonable based on their scarcity. Now, what I will do is hand out, I have packed, but I'll give to everyone after. Very nice gentleman, his name is Rahul Arora. We got together and put together a chart of the bonds. So for those of you who are going to collect them, we'll schedule them. And you can see just kind of like a Freeburg number that they have for currency. The first Liberty loan, the one I showed you, the $100, we'll go back to it in a second, okay? 3.5 long bond. L stands for long, R stands for registered, S stands for short. And we did this chart all the way through all the different, the amounts, the denominations, okay? So that would be an 11L. All right, and I'll hand out the chart after. Any questions so far? Doing a lot of talking. Now, here's the other part. Kaz remained with the Philadelphia Fed from 1919 to 1947, and he was the vice president at the Fed. Worked very, very hard, passionate for many, many years before he went into bank, before he went and became involved and executive at a local bank. What was the name of the bank you're doing? Thank you very much, Michael. Central Penn. Now, here again, this is some real money. Helped raise $400 million during World War II. The Fed tapped on him again, please help us. And he did. He rose to the occasion. Okay, in 1940s dollars. And this, again, I was fortunate enough to pick this up. This was issued right down the street at the Fed. Okay, Bankers Security Building, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. This is a $1,000 Defense Series G war bond. And here's Kaz. So again, you know, folks like this are true patriots. Any questions?
All right.
Please.
A couple slides back, when you and Rob did them, why is the $50 one, the 3.5, why wasn't it ever registered? Everything else was registered.
It's a great question. Thank you for asking, David. The reason why is that at that denomination, they figure, why register the bonds? Okay? So what they did for $100 and over, they registered the bonds. But further series down, we'll have to take a look at the chart. I'm sorry, I don't remember. But they might have registered the bonds. But again, they figured at that value, even though it was a lot of money back then, why go to the trouble and having the government keep track of it that way? So thank you. Other questions from anyone here? All right. I want to thank the folks at Whitman, the Society of Paper Money Collectors, the Historical Society of Pennsylvania, Michael Sienkiewicz and his family, and all of you for coming today. So thank you very, very much. If you have any questions, you can email me. And remember, I have to say the disclaimer again, please. These bonds are keepsakes, not investments per se, and may be worth more or less at any point in time, and they're a wonderful connection to our proud heritage. I thank you all very much for your time and attention. Okay? Thanks. Thank you, everybody. Pleasure. Thank you. See you guys all helping to make a great, fun show. And I'm going to hand out these sheets to you in a second. Pleasure. You're very kind. Thank you.